The Legend of Zelda usually seems like very light-hearted and happy series of adventure games, but even with the most of the games being very family friendly, it also has its dark moments with pretty creepy stuff.
Continuing on with the little Halloween special of ours, we are now going to look at the 10 creepiest things we can find in Zelda. By creepy, we mean the things that creep us out, that we find disturbing, or might just find outright scary as well.
We take into consideration how these things scared us the first time we played any of these games, but we also take into account how creepy we find them today. Some things we might not find as scary anymore, but we might be able to see how creepy they still are today.
And by things, we mean everything from characters to enemies to situations or cutscenes. The only thing we're not including here are areas, neither outdoor areas, towns or dungeons, because that could all be a list of its own, maybe sometime in the distant future.
So let's do this! We're the Owners of Triforce, I'm Owner 2.
And I'm Owner 1, and let's take a look at the top 10 things we find the creepiest in The Legend of Zelda.
For our first, but definitely not the last thing on this list, we're going to Majora's Mask. I spoke about this moment recently, and I'm sure you understand why we're putting this on the list.
The first thing we're picking out here is a moment rather than a real thing, but it's something Owner True still finds creepy to this day. This is about the animation for when you go through a mask transformation.
When Link puts on any of these, he makes these weird noises before he screams out loud, but it doesn't even sound like him. In the end, he stands there with the face of the mask he's put on, but he also looks terrified. I find this really creepy.
And I'm gonna have to agree, I never really found the Deku or Goro mask transformation all that scary as a kid. But the Zora mask was definitely creepy to me. The eyes are completely black with what almost looks like Alice Cooper's old makeup. And he's got sharp teeth, making him almost look like a vampire.
It's sort of a small thing, as Link's always fine right after, but it's definitely a creepy moment to us.
Staying with Majora's Mask, we find another creepy thing. When you defeat King Eagles to Ikana, you learn a song called the Elegy of Emptiness. This song allows you to create lifeless statues of yourself, both in your own original form and in the 3 other mask forms.
The statues of the 3 mask transformations don't look all that creepy. The Deku isn't really creepy at all, but the Goron and Sora are a bit creepy with the lifeless eyes. They're completely white for crying out loud, but it's not these ones that are the most creepy.
As you all know, and probably agree on, Link's statue is the creepiest of all. With the 3 others, it's pretty clear what characters they're representing, but Link's statue? I mean, he doesn't really look the same.
What's with that creepy face? His look is pretty freaky, but his grin is the creepiest thing about it. We can't really say we're all comfortable standing in front of this thing when it's facing us.
We have to be clear though, that we're not taking the whole creepypasta about Ben into consideration here, since we are only looking at the things originating from the game itself. But it's definitely worth a point when pretty much this statue alone created perhaps the creepiest or even scariest video game creepypasta of all time.
Finally moving away from Termina for a bit, we're now going to the world of Hyrule in Twilight Princess. This game also had its very dark moments, and this creepy moment here isn't really something huge, as it's just a couple of seconds of a scary moment.
This is probably more of a scary moment than a creepy one, although there was a pretty creepy build-up. Yeta was this sick but very kind Yeti who was sick because of how she and her husband, Yeto, took in the mirror shard. She helped you for you helping them with ingredients to the soup and getting rid of enemies.
In the end, you would also remove the mirror shard that had caused so many bad things to happen to their home. But what we mentioned so far is not all there is to the mirror, cause when she leads you to it, she looks into it and this creepy tune starts playing. She says that she looks pretty, until things just get weirder and darker.
And then... She turns around once, but that's not all. Even her own head turns another time, and you are greeted with this terrifying face. We gotta wonder though, did she always have that second face in the back of her head? Or does the mirror have the power to do that? Either way, this moment was quite a bit of a surprise, and definitely a creepy moment in the series.
Huh, this place doesn't seem too bad. This place is actually very pleasant.
Yes, almost too pleasant.
Huh, what are these?
I don't know, but they're huge and look sort of creepy. Wonder what the weapon's for.
This one looks even creepier though. It's cloaked and has only half a body.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm liking this.
I wonder what this is.
Wait, no! Don't! Oh crap.
Yes, the silent realm guardians are sort of creepy in itself, but when the chase sequence starts, they're taken to a whole other level.
With the eyes starting to glow and them chasing you until you find the next tier is pretty stressful and at times terrifying. Of course, the music really helps making it more terrifying, but they're still hunting you down, even if that means going through walls. Yeah, we find this creepy.
You know, going on board a ghost ship means that you're going to find something pretty creepy or scary. That certainly was the case with the ghost ship in Phantom Hourglass.
We learned from the very beginning that we would be searching for this ship in the game, since Tetra got lost on it and even turned to stone. And we did find creepy enemies like Skulltulas, Pose, and Reaplings, which are all things to be expected.
What we didn't expect was to find 4 very colorful dressed girls on board this very dark and foggy ship. They're called the Diabolical Cubers sisters, and they act pretty sweet and somewhat pleasant, but their faces were never really to be trusted to begin with.
It's especially easy to see more through them when they tell you to stay away from opening chests that actually has the good treasure in it, while at the same time make it 100% sure that you open the ones with the bad treasures in them.
In the end, they turn out to be the boss of the dungeon, but their real forms aren't really all that scary. We find them creepier in their fake human forms, with their real facial expressions, and especially with their screeching screams whenever they get scared by enemies like the Skulltulas. Seriously, they look like creepy little porcelain dolls, and that's usually not a good thing.
Oh dear me, yes. We've seen that most people who have played this game find this cutscene pretty strange and creepy, and we really agree. For the most part.
The whole cutscene isn't really that creepy, but rather some parts of it. The cutscene really explains everything pretty well. It does get a bit tense when Elia stands there with Link with no pupils in their eyes though, but seeing the interlopers there and all isn't all that creepy either.
However, seeing Link's face like this and hearing him scream is a bit unsettling. But then, there's this WTF moment. Seriously, I remember very well the first time I saw this, and I was never creeped out until this very moment.
This cutscene does its job well for the most part, but there are some parts here that creeps us out more than teaching us what the Legend of Hyrule is. We don't really feel the need to say more about this. If you haven't seen it yourself, do it. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Majora's Mask, again, is filled with really creepy stuff. This one is something most people who have played the game talk about as one of the scariest things in the series, or even in video games overall. What is it? Let's look up in the sky and see what we can find.
The giant moon that's about to crash, of course. It would be pretty terrifying to see a huge sphere crash down onto your own town. But how would that be creepy? Well, add a huge face with a creepy grin on it, and you're all set.
It's of course really terrifying that the moon will crash down on you, That's something you can see on the reactions of many of the characters in the game, but aside from the creepy face, which, by the way, didn't get less creepy in the 3D game, another thing that makes it all creepier is how it just slowly closes in. You have the 3-day counter that counts down to the festival, but at the very same time, the moon will start destroying the town.
Especially during the final hours, when the very emotional music starts and the counter shows a digital number of every minute and second that's left, the earth starts rumbling as it closes in on your inevitable doom.
While all of this is pretty creepy and definitely scary with this being a potential apocalypse and all, you can either let the moon crash, or you can start the 3-day cycle all over again. It's pretty much a cursed cycle, but either way, you're still able to avoid it, making the moon a bit less creepy than other things in the series in our eyes.
One enemy that has terrified players for years, especially when they played Ocarina of Time as kids, is definitely the Redeads. You know, many people claim they're still scary, while many don't find them scary or creepy at all, at least not anymore. But we're not only talking about the ones in Ocarina of Time.
Still though, they are pretty creepy with how they stand around, making those grunt noises and the scream that freezes Link while they walk slowly towards him and choke or hump him to death. I really can't tell.
They're also pretty creepy in other games. They're not as creepy in Twilight Princess in our opinion, as their scream isn't as horrific as previous ones. But they are creepy in how they drag a big and heavy sword that they muster their strength into swinging at you while you're stunned. The creepiest thing about them though is the way they arise from the ground.
The one in Triforce Heroes is somewhat creepy with their blue masks and the ability to just sink or turn their lower body into mud, so that only their upper halves stay above. They're really similar to the ones in Ocarina of Time and Majoras Mask, and speaking of Majoras Mask, the weird and somewhat creepy thing they do is to dance if you wear either the Garo mask, the Gibdo mask, or the Captain's hat.
Arguably, the creepiest one is in Wind Waker, which really has this very colorful and light tone throughout the whole game. One exception is the Earth Temple though, where we find Redeads locked up in coffins standing against the wall.
This means that they come out standing on their own 2 feet, with black and dead eyes. That is, until you walk up to them.
Their scream here is probably the creepiest of them all, and their red eyes and huge gaping mouth don't make them look any nicer either. The Redeads have a huge reputation for being the creepiest enemy in the Zelda series, and while that's hard to argue against, there's at least one creepy enemy above them on this list.
An enemy we actually ended up finding more creepy than the zombified Redeads is none other than the Wall and Floor Masters. Why?
Because they are freaking severed hands living by themselves, and ever since the first game, the Wall Masters have come out of walls or the ceilings to grab you and take you back to the entrance.
It is pretty creepy in the 2D games like the first one and A Link to the Past, but we really think the ones in Ocarina of Time are the creepiest. First of all, they just look the creepiest, but it's creepy in how Navi warns you of shadows coming from the ceiling, and as you notice the shadow grow bigger around you, and you hear a sound of something coming closer and closer, you get grabbed and this creepy hand takes you away.
We're not really getting less creepy with the Floor Masters in the same game. They look exactly the same, some are even invisible to the naked eye, and once you manage to destroy this huge hand, they split into 3 smaller ones. That's pretty creepy.
We have noticed that many people think the moon is the creepiest or scariest thing in the Zelda series, and while that huge thing has a creepy grin on it and is able to destroy an entire town, you're still able to restart the 3-day cycle and people can take refuge. That's not as easy with number 1 here. We do think it's all tragic with the destruction of Clocktown and everything. It's kinda hard to explain, but we just don't find all of that as creepy as, say, being locked in the same room as Dead Hand.
You probably saw this coming, We've been talking about it so many times already, so we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but we need to at least mention why we find it so damn creepy. First of all, you find yourself in a room with floors of wall made of skulls and bones. The first thing you see are the long white arms with the long red fingernails sticking out of the ground.
If you move close to them, you'll get grabbed by them, and this embodiment of a pure nightmare will emerge from the ground and slowly wiggle its way towards you before trying to bite your head off. Unlike the moon, where there's an option to escape rather than face your fears, you're in a room with no escape until you fight and overcome this creepily terrifying monster. If none of this is creepy to you, we really don't know what is.
It doesn't have real eyes, it has red spots on its body that resemble blood, and it doesn't even have normal hands. Its long neck doesn't make it look more pleasant either, and we're often surprised that we don't see more people having this as the creepiest thing in the Zelda series, because, hands down, it's definitely our number one. Well, that was a creepy list, wasn't it? We're sure you disagree on something, because we all have different experiences with what we find creepy and not. So why not tell us in a nice way in the comments? If you liked watching this video, then we would really appreciate it if you gave it a like.
And a subscription is definitely another thing we appreciate, because then you might appreciate not missing out on our next list, where we continue on with the themes of natural areas, with the top 5 waterside themes. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope to see you then.